It felt like it was actually a pretty good conversation there until the end. I think we were understanding each other. It's just, I don't know, like I said, it feels like she thinks that I'm attacking the BDSM community. So I just need to find a way to avoid that feeling. So she was like extremely defensive, right? Because she's protecting something that is very important to her.
Oh my goodness. I did see Cirrus. Hi, Cirrus. Oh my god, that was so frustrating. I don't I don't know how to explain. It felt like bashing my head against a brick wall. Thanks for stepping, Hannah. Um, she's live streaming your live stream. It's so difficult.
Okay. You ready to get started?
Yeah.
So what has brought us together? Do you want to give background? Do you want me to give the background?
I would like to hear your version of events, I guess.
Sure. So I been well, I guess this kind of started a few months back. I was on some ultra lefty panel when a topic I didn't really know or care about came up, and they were describing BDSM, sub versus dom, and I heard this phrase that the most important thing for a dom is aftercare. Time I really didn't know what it meant, but for some reason I looked into it and I thought about it, and I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make much sense. And I talked to my friend who I haven't talked to in a bit, and since like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, because I know she was in the BDSM community, or I don't know if community is the right word there, but she was in there from one of her earlier partners. And we caught up a bit. I found out that she's no longer in that relationship and that a lot of shit happened there. She doesn't feel very good about it. I asked her about how Aftercare worked and how all of that affected how she felt about leaving that community. And she's said sort of something along the lines of the Aftercare is just sort of a bullshit cover up. So I went like a little further down, and it looks like, from what I can tell, because like I was really concerned then, because I thought this was just like standard, that this is like the standard behavior in the BDSM community. It's actually not. There are like people who do abuse people in the BDSM community. I don't know if you want to. I don't think you would contradict that. But
I mean, literally every single community and any group, especially, I mean, it feels bad to say, but often women have to be careful around men in sexual contexts because they get away a lot with abuse. But that is any kind of group situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what frustrated me the most is that on Twitter, your claim was that if you engage in any sort of activity that requires aftercare, that the activity is inherently abusive.
Yeah. You want me to elaborate more? Because I know you and I have been down this loop like several dozen times, but I can try again if you want.
Well, I mean, it sounds like fundamentally your experiences or your knowledge is colored by one person who was in the community and had a bad experience and experienced abuse. And
right. Well, that was the catalyst. I then like started looking at the different communities, and people have like left the BDSM community, and I've heard like the reports and things of that nature. And a theme that seems to come up over and over again is that nobody really talks about it, or they don't talk about it enough.
I mean, people talk about abuse and any sort of sexual community all the time. Oftentimes, though, it's very hard to talk about abuse. And it's a touchy subject, and abusers tend to get covered for or protected in any sort of community, especially if they're men with influence, which happens often.
So when you say sexual communities, is there like other big sexual communities besides the BDSM
like
community?
Any kind of kink community. I mean, you have hookup culture, gay hookup culture particularly, like any, because BDSM is a specific kind of kink community, right. And there are other kink communities.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that there's not like something that I'm missing here. Yeah, that's generally what I would think. So my issue with that is the idea that, of course, when I say aftercare, a lot of people thought that I meant because it's a really big umbrella term, that we mean things like making sure your partner's hydrated, make sure they're physically okay in case like some damage happened, like unintended damage happened during the scene, or the person maybe had agreed beforehand that, hey, after this is done, I'd like some cuddles or like my hair stroked or something along those lines. But that's not what I meant.
Well, that's what aftercare is. And my issue I was taking with you is that you were mixing up terms. There is a thing for what you're describing, and I've said it multiple times. It's called love bombing, and it's a tactic that is used by abusers. It was used by my abuser on me when I was in an abusive relationship. It also happens in cults. Now, love bombing is specifically a thing that happens whenever somebody will do an abusive action towards you, violating your consent. They will harm you in some sort of way. Obviously, coercion, anything like that crosses a boundary for you, emotionally, physically, anything. And then they will turn around and they will usually apologize. They will shower you with praise and love and affection. Maybe they'll buy you things. Maybe they will try to, like, they'll apologize and say, I'll never do that again. I'll make promises to you and everything. And obviously those tend to get broken down the line. That is not aftercare.
Yeah, that's not what I was talking about. I'm talking about the action right after the scene, that we have to check on the person to see that they're physically, mostly, mentally, and emotionally well. Because of things like, what is it called? The sub drop, right? People can obviously have all these emotions due to all kinds of issues, what happened during a scene, how it affected them, and also dealing with like their hormones, how their chemicals are changing in their bloodstream as everything kind of settles down, and they require somebody else to make sure that they're okay physically and emotionally from it. That's what I'm talking about specifically here. And is that not a part of aftercare? Because like that is.
But what is wrong with that action?
Okay, sure. So, reading on that, I've gone down the rabbit hole, but from what I can tell, that's indistinguishable from somebody who's actually being abused and having the all of those feelings being abused afterwards. I don't see how you could possibly make a difference.
What do you mean?
Like how would you identify somebody who was just actually uncomfortable, who was actually humiliated and regretful, somebody who feels used, somebody who feels like that was a mistake? How would you differentiate that person from somebody who has encountered a sub drop?
Oh, okay. So this is actually easy to explain. I'm a sub, and I participate in things like consensual non-consent play, and things like that, where like no doesn't mean no. What you do is, as a sub with your dom beforehand, you have a discussion with them, and we use the stoplight system. So green is good, yellow is I'm kind of uncomfortable, and red is stop, proceed immediately to aftercare. This is like hard line. That way you don't have to remember a safe word. You just say it, and the sub or the dom immediately will stop what they are doing and say, is everything okay? What did I do? What boundary did I cross? And that is their responsibility, is to make sure that if they, crossed a line, that they listen to you immediately and respond. Because ideally, if you are communicating and setting that up with your dom ahead of time, you are the one in full control. Subs can pull the plug at any fucking point. And if a dom does not respect that, now they are violating your consent and they've gone into abuse.
Right. No, that absolutely makes sense. That's why things like safe words and being in control of the situation are extremely important. But I'm not talking about during. I'm talking about after, like aftercare, right? That requirement that we make sure that something like that is taken care of.
I mean, I guess so, like, I'm not understanding your.
Okay, so like, how would you distinguish between somebody who has experienced that sub drop, where they have become disgusted with themselves, when they feel used, when they feel regretful, when they feel like the entire that all of this was a mistake, that they wish they had never done it, that they feel that they've gotten abused, that they just encountered some trauma, and that now they're going to have to process it. How do you differentiate that as a result of the sub drop after an intense scene versus somebody who actually is feeling those things, who is actually abused?
I mean, that's not necessary. Sub drop isn't. It shouldn't leave you feeling like upset in that way generally. If you feel that way, usually it means that there is something wrong. I don't know how to describe this as a sub. So I can go all the way through like CNC play, and yes, obviously the scene is intense and someone is literally the goal is to feel used, but by the end of that, I don't feel um I don't feel taken advantage of. I think that was fun and very intense. We need to get out of the headspace of this role that we are playing, and we go back to our normal roles or relationship, like who we are as people. That
Right.
like
So you
you're
didn't need
exiting
aftercare.
character.
Yeah, you
No,
didn't
that
need
is
aftercare.
aftercare. No, that is literally aftercare, is where you talk about it afterwards. You reflect on the session, you communicate, you I mean, people like aftercare in different ways. Some people like to cuddle, some people like to physically take care of each other. If there's bondage or restraints, having those removed, anything like that. That's the aftercare part.
Right. So that's not the part I was talking about. I was talking about actually attending to somebody who might have had their emotional and mental limits pushed, and they might have went pushed past that. Like that
So you're saying
part of the
somebody who
aftercare.
might have accidentally like had to say pull the plug and trip to safe word and
No,
are
no,
experiencing
no.
an
This
issue?
is on the sub drop after the scene is over. Like when everything is done, then they feel this way.
Well, first of all, I would say that if they are already feeling this way and they didn't feel comfortable enough with their dom to safe word out, um, I would find that would be a red flag with that dom, and it would be like, don't, like, you should feel 100% comfortable if you're going to participate like that.
So just going on that. So what would be because like from what I've read about a sub drop, like you should be expecting those kinds of feelings, at least some of the time after like an intense session.
Not always, but there was, okay, I'll give you an example. There's one guy that I play with who's a very hard dom, and literally one time, and it was not after or during a session, it was just during our day-to-day talk. I told him, I was like, oh, I feel like it's been a little intense lately. Can we just like do some stuff that's a little non-sexual to hang out together and bond? And he was like, yeah, that's totally fine. We can do that. And we could do more of the cute aftercare stuff. And I'm like, okay, cool. And that's all I had to do is ask, and it was fine. Like, he was like, okay, I can accommodate your needs. And that's as simple as it is.
So if right, let's say in this situation that you actually were violated and you actually were abused and you were uncomfortable with this, and you approach your according to the system, you like talk to your partner about it, and then they just go and do these other things for you right now. Does that like
Well,
erase
no,
the
no, it
trauma and
doesn't.
the
No,
abuse
no,
that you
no.
felt happened during that time?
It does not erase. Okay, the whole purpose of aftercare is not to erase abuse. Like I said, that would be love bombing. If somebody crossed a line with me and either didn't listen whenever I gave them a safe word or told them to stop, then I would, me as a person, I would immediately stop. I would cut contact with that person. That is a huge red flag, and probably warn others about it. I know it is difficult, and as someone who's been in an abusive relationship, it is difficult sometimes to get out of an abusive relationship because abusers are manipulators, and they try to confuse you and gaslight you, and they will try to love bomb you after they've done something wrong to make you feel like it's okay now. And that can be difficult, and that's why we need support structures for people outside of it. But it's also why we need education, and why I don't like the way you're confusing these terms, because people need to realize, like, I read the article that you linked, and the sub in that article, I feel like they should have understood when they got into the community. There were so many red flags of people telling them like, oh, a good sub doesn't use safe words. You should have your boundaries pushed and all this stuff. That should, to them, they should have had a community in place. There should have been education in place to let them know that's not okay. And no one should be telling you those things. And if they tell you those things, get out. Like, you need to get out of that, because that's not BDSM play. That's not safe.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I'll agree with you that at least the intent behind things like BDSM play is not to have people feeling abused. But my problem with that structure, when you set up these scenarios and you tell people this is how it goes, and we say that aftercare is the most important part, especially for a dom, and then you explain things, you introduce concepts like the sub drop, like, hey, when you feel when the scene, this intense scene is over, and you feel like terrible, and you feel like this might have been a mistake, the
sub drop is not feeling like it's a mistake, though. You're misunderstanding what sub drop is. Sub drop feels like coming out of okay, so like if you watch a really scary movie or you just got off of a roller coaster, it's like high adrenaline.
That from what I've been reading, that's not necessarily. I guess that could be, or that could be an analogy to what happens, but it's, yeah. There's I guess there's no point in like bringing up articles, but like this is one of the I think it's the first article when you Google it, somebody explaining what the sub drop is. So like if you're learning about sub drop, this is the first thing you would encounter. Because there's an article on Wikipedia. I tried for that. So a lot of these terms and terminologies and the science behind them, I found out there's no like actual science behind them. It's just terminology.
It's not a scientific thing.
So
that's
it's
why
like just
the terms are important.
Right. So the terminology is like in the community itself, right? So that's my problem as an outsider when I see this. I find with a description of that I'm reading here, I know I heard a description in a YouTube video, or actually all these different YouTubers at the time. I should have probably sourced these things, at least to give you the examples of people describing the sub drop as exactly how I did. That like, yeah, you feel like awful after something like that, and they say in the video like, hey, this is expected. Sometimes you feel like this, especially if the session was especially intense, and that you just need to like give it time, take some rest, take some aftercare from your partner, and then after a certain amount of time, some of them said it could possibly go on for weeks, which also it was also like a red flag for me. But the fact you're here telling me that that's not the case, now I'm getting even more confused as to what is actually some of these terms, right? So like I'm getting different definitions about these things that should probably be standardized, right?
Well, it's hard to standardize because it's something that deals with emotions, which is so varied in people that like.
Right, and something like a BDSM activity.
The vast majority of people will tell you that like a sub drop thing is basically you're coming down from an adrenaline rush, or like an emotional high. If you feel like something is wrong after, I assume if it's going into like degradation play, usually that's not something you should ignore. The purpose of aftercare in that instance would be talking to your dom and saying like, I still feel degraded or a little upset. Maybe we should not do that anymore. Maybe we should push back that boundary some more, and I'm not comfortable. Like, that's part of aftercare, is talking to your dom about how that made you feel and discussing together, maybe we shouldn't push that boundary as far as we did. Maybe we should take a step back. And then again, you should be able to feel comfortable enough with the dom that you are playing with to communicate that to them. And that's aftercare. That's the whole point.
Okay. So just like what I'm reading right here is like you can expect adrenaline and cortisol, stress hormones. Sub drop has a similar emotional effect to depression because they both involve insufficient happy hormones, a shorter time scale than depression, even though depression does have episodes where you feel worse than your resting state. Going through this article, they go around the lengths of time you should expect and things of that nature. So, but you're saying if you are experiencing something like this, it's important to communicate to your partner.
I mean, in general, aftercare, the reason why people say aftercare is so important is because no matter what you feel after the session, you should be communicating. And I mean, just that's sex in general, not just BDSM. You need to be communicating with your partner about, like, open and honestly about how everything made you feel and if you are comfortable doing those things. Because sometimes we don't know if we like a thing until we try to experience it, and then maybe we realize, well, I'm not really that into that. And that's okay if sometimes that can happen. That happens in life. But we should be able to talk about it and say, let's not do it anymore.
Yeah. So also, when I think about relationships in general and power dynamics that we can see, yeah, Ty. Sorry, when we're talking about power dynamics and relationships, that we put these standards in front of people. We say, hey, this is what I'm into. If you want to do it, I'd like to do it. This is what you would have to agree to before we did it. And things like consent, like agreements about safe words, how we're going to do it, how far we're going to go, what they should expect. And you might even include, especially if you're like introducing someone to BDSM, give them expectations of things like the sub drop and things like that. That afterwards, you just make sure you communicate to me, yada yada yada. And I feel like that entire setup is like prime and rich for abuse to take place. Like it's almost like
no,
just like
it's no more prime for abuse to take place than any normal relationship that could have any other power dynamic, like someone earning more money than you. Like,
yeah, no,
there are numerous things that could be rife for abuse. That doesn't mean that BDSM as a community is inherently more abusive of a thing.
Right. No, I agree with you. So we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about power dynamics. But in this case, I'm talking about the sexual interaction between two people. So you can have a power dynamic in a relationship, and where a woman goes in there, she has a husband who's making way more money than her. She's expected to like cook and clean and give him whatever he wants in bed, some kind of nonsense like that. And she consents to it, but you and I can both agree that if he becomes physically abusive to her, that she's not actually consenting anymore, or she's consenting in maybe a uninformed way, right? So like an actual abuse could be going on there, and the person who's getting abused wouldn't necessarily recognize it. They'll think that that's part of the deal.
So are you saying, okay, so this is another thing that feels like a fundamental misunderstanding because you're not involved in BDSM. The power dynamic in BDSM is that the sub has all the power.
Yeah, like, ideally, right? I'm talking about when it's misused. I'm talking about that the system is set up in a way to attract people to misuse it by its very nature.
No. Because the whole point is that the community often talks about, like, all of us who engage in it, especially subs, talk about how subs have all the power. Like, we are the ones who draw the line and can stop play at any point with one word. That is like one of the through lines of BDSM that I've ever understood since, like, you know, being into it, participating in it, engaging with other people.
Yeah, like I said, I'll agree with you. I'll even give you a huge percentage. 99.9% of it usually goes down pretty fine. I'm talking about the nature of the system itself, and that it can lead to people.
What do you mean by the nature of the system? Because we're
literally sure. So we're literally talking about putting people into a position to get abused by the whole outlook of the whole goal in fulfilling a sexual fantasy, whether it be like violence, punishment, degradation, humiliation, things like that. Like we're setting that up.
How does it set people up?
Because you're going to play doing this stuff and go as far as you want, and it's up to the sub to say when to stop, right? But if we're talking about a relationship with a power dynamic, kind of like the guy with a lot of money and the woman who's just sort of expected to go along with what he says, that even though all of the consent check marks were ticked, this person is actually getting abused because she doesn't want to lose that relationship with this person. Maybe, well, let's
So
not
this
say
is
it's
just
money. Let's say it's
every
actual
single
love towards them.
relationship. This is every single possible sexual relationship, not just, it's not inherent to BDSM.
I'm literally talking about like physical and emotional abuse between people. Like
Yeah, and I'm saying,
okay, so let's bridge this. Maybe this is where we're missing each other. See if how I can better explain this, because I see what you're saying. I want you to understand sort of where I'm coming from, and I can see how it's not as clear as it seems to me. So when a person enters any other relationship that's not about sexual activities, right? It's not like a BDSM relationship.
I mean, sex is generally a huge part of a relationship with someone, specifically a romantic one, for a lot of people.
I know. Yeah, that's fine. But like sex, by its nature, isn't designed to, or shouldn't be thought of as something that could be that in and of itself, it's pushing the limits of your emotional and physical state. Like you shouldn't be having sex expecting to be mistreated or agreeing to be mistreated.
Why?
Right?
Wait. Why is that? It's so much more complicated than that. Sex is an activity that you do with people, usually people you're close with. Some people are fine hooking up, but sex is just an activity. It's not like a sacred thing.
I completely disagree with that. It
Okay,
can
so
be.
this is the fundamental difference.
No. It can be fun, and it can be something that people just engage in for the sake of it. That they, which is I'm gonna be clear, completely fine. But what I disagree with is claim that that's the only thing it can be. But let's just not
I don't
go.
think anyone said that's all it is. I mean, obviously, people find emotional depth and bonding through sex, and they also do that through BDSM.
Right. So when people engage in like hookup culture or just like regular hedonistic type, I'm just trying to get mine, like I'm only here for hookups, things like that, or they just have casual sex, or they have like sex with their boyfriend they're not necessarily that into, but are kind of okay with it. They're not going into those sexual interactions with the idea that they should have their mental and emotionally boundaries pushed, that those states, they should never be expecting that they could be possibly broken by their partner.
I feel like it's kind of funny that you say that, coming at it from the lens of like, I'm assuming a cis guy, right? Because as a woman, you go into every sexual encounter expecting that there could possibly be issues. Just personally, I've always had to be on guard with relationships, not even just sexual ones. Just entering a relationship with another person and then having to have a discussion with them about boundaries beforehand, because that's what most people should do.
Yeah, we should have talks about boundaries, things that you're unwilling to do, and this is like this is the sort of criteria you're putting forward just to make sure that we don't get those things pushed, right?
I mean, yeah, that's part of sex education as well.
Exactly.
Like, we should...
So when I'm talking about the BDSM activities, where I think that obviously people can engage in this and be completely fine, but I'm saying it's inherently alluring to abusers, is that it's set up from the outset for people to expect to be pushed past their limits, and that we have a tool in place.
No, you shouldn't be pushed past your limits. That's the thing.
Sure, but like when somebody gets
pushed past them.
Sure, so when somebody actually does get pushed past them, then right, we then have aftercare to take care of that, and we have terminology.
No, then you have someone violating your consent.
No, because the person is still consenting to this because they agreed beforehand.
No, if someone is pushing your boundaries, and I mean pushing your boundaries that you laid down at the beginning of a BDSM relationship, they are violating your consent. You are no longer consenting to that activity.
Well, we have
That is
safe
not a
words
thing.
to start and stop. And when I'm talking about power dynamics and when I'm talking about abusers being attracted to this, I'm saying the person there is trying to please the dom as much as possible, right? And that in this system, because they checked all the I's beforehand, even when they feel uncomfortable, they don't want to be, they don't want to agree to this and
No.
put the dom through all of this. This is
No, that's incorrect.
this
That's
is just
incorrect.
this is a possibility. I'm not saying this is the standard. I'm saying that the system is set up for this to possibly happen.
The system is not set up for anything. There's the whole point of the community is to talk about these things in a way to say, hey, if you're a sub and a dom
Right.
is violating you in this way or making you feel uncomfortable, you have the power to pull the plug. You should feel empowered to do that. That is the purpose of the community.
I completely agree with all of you. And just the fact that you need a community like that is an indication that this is really dangerous shit that we should be talking about all the time, right?
How is it dangerous, for one?
Because people can be mentally and physically pushed past the place that they're comfortable being.
Do you think that doesn't happen in normal vanilla sex?
Yes, but there's no like communities set
How
up.
often do you think women do things that they don't necessarily want to do, sexually, just in a normal vanilla, non-kink, heterosexual relationship?
Yeah, they probably do it a lot, but it's not normalized by people. If anybody else hears about that, they will say absolutely not. You shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be talking to this person, and you shouldn't be doing anything that you're not comfortable with. But
yeah,
when we look at
the thing that happens in BDSM as well.
this is the difference. In the BDSM community, we have terms like aftercare, we have terms like sub drop, and we have things like making people consent beforehand and having them tick all the boxes and mark all the spots and get themselves set up and agree to these things. And they're not necessarily in a relationship, but a lot of the times they are in a relationship with an opposing person who's like their dom, who they want to please and who they want to fulfill all their sexually fantasies for.
Okay, you are already misunderstanding the nature of a sub-dom relationship to begin with. As a sub, my goal is not to please the dom.
Okay.
We are mutually benefiting from a sexual relationship.
I understand what you're saying.
They
And
get pleasure,
I've
and
made
I
pretty
get
clear.
pleasure. The sub also experiences pleasure from these things. It's for our sexual fantasy as well. It is my sexual fantasy to be taken, like I want to be used. I want someone to push past my nose that don't really mean no. I want someone to harm me mildly. I'm not super into pain play. I want someone to restrain me. Those are my sexual fantasies that I get pleasure from. It's not to please the dom.
Sure.
There are plenty of things that
I know
that
what
dom
you're
would
saying.
be into that I wouldn't do.
I know what you're saying, but you keep giving me the way it should play out in a perfect situation. And I'm saying I agree with that. I know that stuff like this happens and it's perfectly fine and the adults are fine in the situation. What I'm talking about is situations where the power dynamic between couples, especially a dom introducing a new sub to the community, they don't have that sort of power that you assume that they do. That they have a partner who is bringing them in this way, having all these conversations with them beforehand, making them tick all these boxes, and the person, because of the nature of the relationship, wants to please this person, goes through all of these steps, wants to experiment as being a sub, and might actually because
you're talking about a very specific scenario in which someone joins a kink community where it's not initially their fetish to be a submissive, and then they get coerced into it by another person. So that's all automatically this is set up as toxic, and the other person is manipulating someone into this.
Sorry, I don't do these discussions much, but I'm finding it really hard to keep the point that I'm trying to get, because I keep like getting like cut off like as I'm reaching my conclusion. So what I'm saying about the relationship itself is that because of the way it's set up, people can get abused and not actually recognize they're being abused, because in a way they've kind of agreed to it. Sort of like in that article that you read, she's like, oh, when she actually did feel terrible, she always thought it was her fault, right? That she didn't negotiate properly, that she should have like done something different in this way, and that the feelings that she was having was a result of her activity or something that should be expected because of things like the sub drop, right? So when I say
she
it's
also talked about people who told her things that were like super incorrect and huge red flags right
right,
off the start.
I agree completely. That's why I'm saying that the nature of the activity in the first place is set up in a way to have things like this happen, right? That's why these talks need to go on so often. And kind of like we the thing additionally that scares me, that erotic novelist who came into our Twitter conversations trying to say that any abuse that I was pointing to isn't actually BDSM. It's like somebody who's outside of BDSM not engaging in BDSM. Like that, when I see stuff like that, I see an extremely gatekeepy type organization who wants to police its own, who wants to make sure that they don't have prying eyes into what's going on. They could be actually harboring things like what was described in that article, and we don't actually have that discussion outwards towards everybody.
That discussion is happening constantly, and it's the same as any sort of, again, it's the same as any sort of social space. BDSM isn't inherently set up to make abuse easier for anyone. In any sort of social community, especially something if you're going to like a local BDSM like club or like a very localized thing, those individual things can have problems. Like, for instance, the Me Too movement and the gaming community, where any person can exploit any amount of parasocial power or influence or social capital that they have over someone else in order to manipulate and abuse them. But that happens in any sort of community setting where somebody might be perceived to have more influence.
Okay. I can't explain the same point over and over again. When I say, well, I'll just do it one last time as summarily as possible.
You're not a part of the kink community, so it's just frustrating.
Yeah.
Because
So here's the gatekeeping again. Right.
You say we don't have these discussions around consent, but we talk about it more than most like couples, than vanilla people who engage in sexual activity, casual sex, just normal vanilla sex. These discussions are held more often in kink communities because it's very important to do that. There are so many people who have sexual encounters with other people that they later end up regretting, that never talk about it because they don't talk about how they feel like they can set boundaries ahead of time.
Okay, so I was just in a Twitter thread with you with a whole bunch of people saying that this stuff is like impossible to happen, that I don't understand aftercare, yada yada yada. Somebody came in and said
no one said it wasn't impossible to happen. People literally told you, yeah, sometimes abusive people pretend to try to be a part of the BDSM community and use it as a cover. There are people who will say, I'm a dominant, but they're really just an asshole, and they're a sadist, and they don't give a fuck about other people. And that's when the red flags come in. This is like 50 Shades of Grey BDSM, where they violate your safe words or tell you that you shouldn't use them, or they will emotionally manipulate you or try to coerce you into having sex, like in that article where that woman talked about how a guy refused to leave her home, literally trespassing. That, once you cross that, the reason why people say that's not BDSM is because once you cross those lines, it is no longer definitionally BDSM. It is abuse. It's because BDSM requires consent. If you break consent and you start breaching into coercion, it's abuse. It's just abuse.
Yeah, I agree with that. But when I'm saying that the sort of the nature of this sort of, I guess I could say this extreme sexual behavior when it comes to pushing limits the way that happens in the BDSM community, as far as like all the different things we see, like humiliation, degradation, punishment, yada yada yada, that in of itself is a prime place for abusers to come in and do what they want with people. And because we have things like safe
so what's your
safe
solution?
words,
You're telling
talking
people to not participate in degradation or anything like that. I'm not allowed to have my sexual fantasies
No,
because
I think that if you go through all that stuff and you do it because you want to and you like it and you have no problem there, you shouldn't need something like Aftercare, which is the point of my
I still
tweet.
need something like Aftercare.
So when I'm saying Aftercare, I mean taking care of you emotionally and physically because
Yes.
of the sub-drop feeling that you're having there.
Okay, again, your definition of aftercare is not the definition of aftercare. Aftercare is a very, very broad definition. And
yeah, with a lot of umbrella terms. That's why I keep specifying it. Are you saying what I'm saying? Wait, no, it absolutely is. You can't have on one end.
Partner is emotionally and physically well after sex is part of aftercare, and it happens for everyone who engages in sex if they give a shit about their partner.
So this is why I was very specific, and that's why I just said it was an umbrella term. That's why I understand the need to specify what I'm talking about. The reason I say it's an umbrella term is that on one end you have to say, hey, make sure your partner's hydrated, make sure that you help them clean up, make sure you shower together, make sure that you give them cuddles because you know they like cuddles. So on the other end is like, make sure your partner is okay mentally, physically, and emotionally. Make sure.
Yes. Do you think it's wrong if someone, I'm into bondage. Do you think it's wrong for me to participate in that because my partner would have to check after to make sure I don't have any sort of like injuries that might need to be taken care of?
Maybe physical injuries. Actually, the more I thought about it, I don't think I'm talking that much about physical injuries unless the person got physical injuries that they didn't expect or want. I'm more talking about probably your mental and emotional state afterwards.
Yeah, so whenever you're a sub, you typically go into subspace, which is where it's very, very difficult to describe it to somebody who's not into it. When you go into subspace, it's almost like taking on another role. And when you come out of that, you are basically transitioning from that to your regular day-to-day persona, especially if you don't do a 24/7 BDSM style relationship and you only engage in play occasionally with other people. Like me, I am an argumentative, very strong-headed person. When I'm in subspace, I don't fight or argue. I don't act the same. I am a little different. And aftercare, emotionally and mentally, is it's a transitionary state to get back to that, to get back to a normal dynamic.
Okay. So when we're talking about that, well, I guess you want to say the normal dynamic, the transitionary period or whatever. I'm talking about somebody who feels sort of out of place. They feel used, abused. They feel that maybe they went too far, that they might have made a mistake, or that was a little more than they were expecting.
If
that
they
they're
did that, then that's also, again, that's part of aftercare, is to communicate to your partner that those things made them uncomfortable and they don't want to do them anymore.
Exactly. But that's not necessarily how the person's going to accept it, right? Because they had that contract beforehand that they're consenting to all of these things.
No, that's not. Oh my God, you don't understand how this works. The whole point is it's a moving conversation. You don't sign a contract and are blood sworn to like what you checked off and agreed to. If I tell my dom at the beginning of our relationship, I'm really into being like, hit with a switch or something, or like a riding crop, and then after we do that I go, actually I really didn't like that and it was uncomfortable and it kind of hurt. They need to change. It is not like, oh well, you said you were okay with it at the start, so why aren't you okay with it now? If that's the case, red flag, leave. They're abusing you.
So this goes back to my sort of structuring when we include things and tools like aftercare, is that it's not the dom who's going to be saying stuff like, hey, this is what you agreed to. I'm saying the sub is going to think to themselves, after they might have actually been abused, that somehow it was their fault, that maybe they didn't negotiate the terms properly, that this awful feeling that they're having is the sub drop, right? And that they just need to get over it and just maybe communicate to their partner, for instance, that they're experiencing this right now, but they hope to get over it soon. I just need some cuddles or something like that. That there's like tools in place to indicate that the feeling that they're having is normal, when it
It's not saying that it's normal. The whole point is to talk to your partner about why you feel the way you do and to work
I
through it,
know that's the
communicate.
point.
Aftercare is addressing it. It's not saying that it is normal to feel that way. It is to say, hey, I feel this way and I don't like it. Can we not do that anymore? I don't want to feel that way.
Ideally, yeah, that's how it would happen. I'm saying that's not necessarily how it's going to happen in these relationships. That's why when I say it's like by nature seems to be sort of an activity that could lead to abusers, or not necessarily even abusers, because in cases like this, the dom could actually just think that they're doing what they want, and the person who loves them or is extremely attracted to them, who just wants to please them in some kind of way, and is engaging in this.
And that's a failure of communication. That can happen in a normal fucking relationship.
It
where two
can,
people
but normal
aren't
fucking relationships
that
don't have, right. So normal relationships don't have that sort of dynamic where somebody's getting pushed to those kind of limits. That it's extremely difficult to tell if you're actually those feelings that you're having afterward are feelings of you being traumatized or just feelings of you having a sub drop, right? That because you're told beforehand that sub drop is a thing and they should be expecting these feelings afterwards, right?
No one tells you to expect, or I've never, first of all, getting into this play, no one's ever told me to expect to feel like shit after I've had a session with a dom. Literally no one has ever told me that. If anything, they've always told me that your dom should actually take care of you and you should feel good after a session and you should come out of it feeling happy or recharged, or even if you had an adrenaline thing, it should feel like you got off a roller coaster and you just had fun. Or like went to a scary
why would
movie.
aftercare be needed in a case like that?
Why do you want to cuddle on the sofa after you watch a scary movie and you feel a little like frightened by the movie
this
that
is the thing again. Sorry, let me be more specific. Why would you need somebody to check on your mental and physical awareness as a part of the routine of the scene, or I guess the activity, the scene being a part of it as well? If you should be, the person should be elated and feeling good and feeling awesome about it.
Because you can do that, but it's intense. It's a lot, depending on how intense you push it. Some people really like to get into the pain play and to the degradation and stuff like that. It can feel like an emotional high, and it's like a come down from that.
Okay, I feel like we're just looping over and over at this point, but I think you at least understand. I think where you think what I said was wrong. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
All I can say is that from what I can tell and what I'm perceiving about this conversation is that you, as an outsider, you've never participated in kink play of any kind. You don't understand the dynamic, you don't understand the community, the discussion, the education that's constantly going on to talk about consent. And it seems like you're coming at it from a Puritan angle of, you view it as this icky, scary thing from the outside. Like, oh, how could anyone want?
I went over it more than once. How could anyone
want to feel that way? You know,
that's like, not what I said at all. I went out of my way more than once that if you're feeling great afterwards, that seems like a really good activity.
You can say that, but the entire tone I've had with you both on Twitter and on here feels a lot like you talk down to subs and say, I know what's better for you. And if you're doing this thing that makes you feel like emotionally one way, then it's bad for you.
So my entire concern about this is that the potential of a sub, especially in a sub being introduced to the BDSM community through a dom that they like a lot, has an elevated chance of being abused because of it, and because of the nature of the activity itself is almost set up for abusers to.
The nature of the activity is not set up for abusers.
Okay. We're just gonna loop again because I think I displayed pretty clearly when you're engaging in activities that pushes people to their emotional and physical boundaries.
It's not pushing people to the boundaries. You set a boundary. If someone is pushing past your boundary, they are abusing you.
I said pushing it to the boundary. So we're engaging with bringing our mental, emotional, and physical states to the boundary of what you're comfortable with. Is that not correct now?
Now that's correct. Yes. If you
so that's exactly what I'm saying. That like you're engaging with the line, right?
And there's nothing inherently wrong with that.
There's nothing inherently wrong with that. I completely agree. But I'm saying that is in and of itself an activity that would be key, would be something that abusers could take advantage of. Or it could be the case that doms could actually be made be abusing people without knowing it because of the dynamic they have, their relationship with the sub, right?
I have a question. What's your solution to that then?
My solution to that is to not have these sorts of excuses afterwards. That if you're feeling something like, if you feel really bad afterwards, if you have the sub drop, if you will, or you feel like you've been used and abused and that you don't like what happened, that you can, especially if you definitely feel like you were traumatized, you should definitely call the person out. You should go through all the proper channels. And at the very least, you should break up with that person and not engage in that activity anymore, right?
Oh, so the thing that already happens? So,
more importantly, on top, yeah, well, not necessarily what already happens. That like, this is going back to what I was actually saying about having terms like aftercare, is that a person is less likely to go with what you say. Well, you should break up with them. You shouldn't be engaging in this stuff, that you're actually getting abused right now. That you have terms like aftercare and terms like sub drop to be expecting these things, and that because you signed all these things beforehand, these social contracts about like consenting and knowing exactly what they're getting into and knowing their safe words, yada yada yada, that you have now been put in a place where actually it's sort of your fault at this point if you're not comfortable with this, because you have nobody said. Okay, so
hard.
I'm not saying that nobody says it's their fault. I'm saying the person can feel that way. You understand? Like they themselves.
And that's a lack of education on behalf of, say, a community, introducing them to that, and that's a lack of resources and people for them to reach out to, or feel like for them to understand what's okay and what's not. But that's not unique to BDSM. I experienced that in a normal relationship where I was emotionally abused. There are a lot of things that I experienced growing up because of the way my parents raised me that I thought was normal in a relationship, and then experienced them in my relationship and thought, oh, it's fine. He's only yelling at me because he loves me. And then, it takes outside people to tell you, like, you really shouldn't feel that way and someone shouldn't treat you that way. And to be educated
that's what I'm doing right now, right? Because you actually thought you actually had those devices put in place for you to think that was normal, right?
But it wasn't.
But it took somebody from the outside to say, actually, it looks like you're getting abused here.
But the thing is that people inside the BDSM community tell people, like, if this is happening to you, you are being abused, you're being hurt, you need to, it's very important that you understand that someone should not be doing that to you.
Yeah. No, I agree. That's why it's really important. I want to say, going down this community is pretty huge. There's a lot of positive information out there, and a lot of people who are very careful about telling people what to do and what to expect, and to actually identify when you're actually being abused, and encouragement to actually leave that person. And if it continues, to like go through the normal sets of actions you would do with any abuser, which honestly, is really good.
Because of the education behind BDSM, I feel like I would have been more equipped to recognize if a dom was trying to take advantage of me sexually than I would have in an emotionally abusive relationship with someone I was just dating. That was harder for me to parse out than it would be to notice a red flag from someone in a like BDSM situation. Okay. Because there is such a huge community talking about the importance of consent and how the dom does not set the boundaries, the sub does, and that the sub has all of the power and all of the control of the situation, and they shouldn't feel like,
or they should, yeah.
Yes, they should, absolutely, 100%. And if a dom tells you otherwise, run and never talk to them.
Yeah, so I think another thing about this that we're sort of missing each other. I'm not necessarily, well, I guess I sort of am when I'm saying that this is inherent for abusers to take advantage of. That's one thing. But in another case, the dom could just actually be doing what they want to do, and they think this partner that's signed up for this stuff actually is doing the things that they agreed to, and that they're having a good time. But that's not necessarily the case because of things like these power dynamics we've seen between
Well,
two
I
sets
mean,
of people, especially relationships. And the activity
that
itself is set
again,
up to push that line.
that's like any sexual relationship. You can have a miscommunication between two people where you're doing something, both parties assume that the other one is happy because they're not communicating. There is some responsibility on you as a person to speak up to the other person and say that you are not happy or something is wrong or you don't feel good.
Yeah.
Like everyone, both people in that relationship carry that responsibility, because it is like if someone thinks you are fine and continues on about their day, they're gonna keep doing the same things because they don't know if you don't tell them.
Okay. And then when we think about the being extremely forward and we're talking to each other, this is why I say that we're looping, that we're talking to each other and we're clear of everything up front, and we have terminology like experiencing the sub drop and experiencing and being expected to maybe have some things that would need aftercare from your partner, that when you're actually getting abused, I think it gives you the opportunity to be less likely to recognize actual abuse versus when you're just actually experiencing the normal sub drop that's being expected.
If anything, like I said, it's more likely to experience to understand the difference between abuse in a BDSM relationship, because there's a difference between the kind of person who is love bombing you after you've communicated to them that you are upset, and someone who will have a discussion with you afterwards to re-talk about where do you draw the line on your boundaries, like, was that okay? Did you enjoy yourself? If you didn't enjoy yourself, then what should we do different? Stuff like that. That's the requirement of aftercare. Like, if you're pushing boundaries and you went too far and you stop the scene and the other person says, I don't really like that, again, the aftercare in that instance is someone saying that what do you like, what went wrong, what can we do different?
Yeah, that's ideally how it would work, right?
And not saying, I'm going to keep doing that, it's normal for you to feel like shit. That's not what aftercare is.
Well, no, when we talk about terms like the sub drop, we're actually are saying that it's expected to that there's a good chance you'll experience this, and it is
I don't know where you got that
like
definition, but most people who talk about sub drop are literally just talking about either coming out of a different headspace or an adrenaline rush. Not that you should feel depressed or feel like shit. If you have a something that feels like depression, then something is wrong.
Okay, I guess all of the sources that I was looking at are wrong. I'll do some more research on that. But if you're saying that aftercare absolutely is 100% when that's described to people, says that you should not feel bad physically or emotionally after sex.
You might feel bad
when we say aftercare, we're talking about getting your partner to take care of you, to cuddle you, to make sure that all your wants and needs are taken care of. If that's only aftercare and it's not the latter, then I will change my opinion.
I mean, yeah, that is literally, yes. That was the whole point, is that everyone was telling you. And you say that like,
I have all of this information in front of me that says the exact opposite.
I don't know what your source is, but literally everyone that was dogpiling you on Twitter was telling you that you were wrong, and that's not what aftercare is.
Okay, so if I can provide you then with a whole bunch of information from different sources in the BDSM community, talking about things like the sub drop of you being expected to feel bad, to like, well, you need aftercare to take care of you in case you actually feel mentally or emotionally unwell. You would change your opinion and actually think I have a point?
No, I think what you're experiencing is probably someone saying, if someone crosses a boundary with you, it's important in aftercare to discuss it, and you're probably misinterpreting it as saying, like, it's okay to keep doing that. I have a feeling.
I'm not saying that it says that explicitly. I'm saying that device of aftercare covers up, sort of redirects somebody's response to possible trauma and abuse to thinking that is normal.
It doesn't cover up anything.
Well, yeah, if somebody's feeling extremely depressed, it's really easy. There's a term right there for when you feel really bad. You don't actually feel trauma and you don't feel abused.
No,
you're actually just feeling sub drop.
No, they literally. This is the thing that
I agree with you. I agree with you that they're actually experiencing these things. What I'm saying is there's things here that will redirect them from
No, it
following
doesn't
through
redirect them. It
with
doesn't
that
redirect
conclusion.
them. As specifically in the community, we talk about that if you engage in this kind of play, some people like to engage in it as a coping mechanism for abuse they've experienced in the past, and they could have a traumatic like relapse and have an actual triggering event. And someone taking care of them after that is aftercare. That doesn't mean that the triggering event or whatever they experienced was like, oh, this is healthy and we should totally do this again. That's not what that means. It's making sure that the person is healthy and they can be experiencing trauma because they are engaging in something that might have carried a risk that they went into. The whole point is saying, like, I will take care of you and make sure that that doesn't happen and that we can, like, make sure you're healthy.
Okay, but they could also say that, hey, I feel really bad right now, but this is the subject that I heard about, right? And not really need to say anything about that because they were told beforehand.
That sounds like someone being educated extremely poorly. I've never, ever, and I will say this, I've never talked to another sub who was like, I feel like depressed after every one of my BDSM sessions and that's normal. No one has ever said that to me.
I know, because what I'm saying here is that nobody says that out loud because they think that they were just experiencing some of the terminology that were laid in front of them before the session started or before they entered the community or as they're entering the community.
This is some weird fringe case that you've latched onto as a way to say it's an issue
I'm talking
with the
about the system. I'm talking about the activity and the way it's set up and the terminology used to allow things like this to happen.
And you're using a butchered form of the terminology to mean something that it's not what it is.
I
like
understand.
You're saying just because. Do you think that we should stop using aftercare in general as a term? Because
yeah, absolutely. Or you should be more specific and eliminate the part that says you should make sure that the mental well-being of your partner who might have experienced something like traumatic or might be going through some shit right now or might be experiencing the sub drop, that we should say, actually, after these sessions, you actually should feel really good, that you should feel no regrets, and that if something leaves you not feeling good, you can communicate.
Says that. We already say that. That's
I know you wait. But then I have things like when you go through these different experiences, that you should expect the sub drop after this, and you've agreed beforehand to possibly experience something like this. If anyone
said that to me, it would be a red flag. If someone said to me, it's okay
Listen,
for you to feel like shit.
You're really smart and you're completely engaged completely in the BDSM community, and you know exactly how all of this goes. What I'm talking about are people who are more vulnerable to spaces like this, people who don't have the experience, people who are told.
Abusers will seek vulnerable people to abuse. That's how that works. But the thing is that the importance isn't saying, the importance is not saying, let's stop using the word aftercare or let's fundamentally change the BDSM community or stop doing BDSM or whatever.
Okay.
The key is education, reaching out, more community,
I agree.
talking to people, subs networking with each other, making sure that there's a help. Like, that is the key. And you have done nothing like that. All you've done is try to, but you've misunderstood terms. You don't understand, fundamental aspects of the community. You're not in a part of the discussions where everyone talks about, consent and boundaries and what's normal to feel.
So you're saying because I'm outside that I can't possibly know when abuse is going down, or I can't know
I'm saying
that
you're
mechanisms
outside,
in place could be encouraging abuse?
Because you're outside, you're not privy to the fact that these conversations have been happening forever now.
I don't doubt that these conversations happen. I'm absolutely sure that they do happen. I've never once said that I don't think this conversation is happening, and that there aren't I think I actually went through it earlier, that there's lots of resources out there and there's lots of positive encouragement from the BDSM community to guide people away from things like this. What I'm saying is, when we talk about things like that terminology and we're telling people that they should expect after the scene to not feel the same way they did going into it, that we're giving people a way to internalize trauma instead of actually seeking out the help that they need.
Every resource I've ever seen is aftercare involves talking about exactly what you feel so that it can be addressed properly. So I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah, but the
Saying
person
that
thinks that
people
what they're
can-
experiencing is just the sub drop, right?
No, they don't.
And they agreed to this
And
beforehand.
even if you come out of it feeling shitty and think that it's normal, you should still talk about it. Even when I'm excited and happy about the end of a session, I talk about things and like, what did I like? Like pointing out specifics. Communication after a scene is essential, no matter what you feel, even if you think it's normal to feel that way.
Yeah, and that's fine. Like, you can internalize it. You have, hey, that session was great. I felt really shitty afterwards. It was the sub drop, I'm sure, but I'm gonna get over that, and hopefully next time I'm not actually gonna experience it.
That's not how that goes at all, and that's not how it should go. And that's not what sub drop is. You keep misusing that.
Can you? Okay. I don't want to do some like Wikipedia lookup right now, but I've gone through this a few times. I've looked into different communities of them talking about the sub drop.
I would like you to send me your sources.
Okay, I will send you the sources, and the sources are going to say that sub drop is your chemicals changing between the scene itself.
Just please send me a link. Drop it in the Discord right now so I could look at this.
That would mean me going back and finding all the things again, because I went through this rabbit hole.
Okay, so you don't have your sources on hand.
Do
you don't have a search history that you could go back to?
Are you really gonna do this right now? Are you gonna? I will sit
here.
Am
I going to ask you to pull your sources up? Yes, please cite your sources.
Okay, so I want to be clear, if I'm going to go through all this effort right now, that when I find you sources that say these things, we're going to agree beforehand that these sources are going to say that the sub drop is an experience that somebody has.
I don't know what to agree to because I don't have your sources, dude. I need them in front of me to look at them.
No, the whole reason we need to go look at sources because you don't think what I just said is real, right?
No,
so I want to make sure that when I look these things up, that I know what you don't think is real. So if you say there's nothing like the sub drop,
it depends on what the source is from. Is it something reputable or is it some shitter who no one cares about who's saying things incorrectly? Because people can lie on the internet.
Sure. So where would you get your information on the sub drop?
I talk to other people in the community who I trust. I don't look up things online and search for. I don't know. I have conversations with people I have sexual relationships with, and what feels good and what doesn't. And if I feel upset about a thing, I just talk to them. That just feels normal. I don't do academic research before I decide if I feel okay with a sex thing.
Okay, well, that's not what we're talking about in this case. But I don't know what else to tell you. If it's just the result that you came into an extremely good part of the BDSM community that had absolutely no abusers, but you should at least have some resources to look up things you might not be sure about, right? Because right now what you're telling me is your own personal experience is enough to speak about the entire BDSM community as a whole, because I'm pretty sure it's worldwide, right? It might be even solar system wide, maybe even galaxy wide. Because BDSM community, they talk a lot. There's a lot of information out there, and they make sure that all of this information is available to everyone.
Okay, so this is funny to me because whenever I actually look up sub drop to try to find where you're pulling this from, I find a Medium article. Medium can be written by anyone, so already. Right. And then they also mention top drop, which you don't talk about either.
So wait, you're looking for my sources? Is that what you're doing?
Yes, I'm trying to see if I can figure out what
I said.
use.
I said I will find the sources. I'll do it right now. I just want to know what you disagree with. So when we find the sources, I can show you that indeed the sources I said reflect what I said to you, right? That's why we look for the sources. But it's not worth going through this, is that when I show you this, you're just going to say, well, actually, I don't know what you're going to say in that point. Like, what would be the point of looking it up if you just agree with what was said? So I want to make sure that if we're going to have this disagreement, that sub drop is an experience somebody has where they go through that chemical change, where they have like a really they feel really shitty afterwards for one way or another.
So okay, this article that I found actually kind of gives a really good
Wait.
I guess analogy.
So you're gonna dismiss a Medium article, but you're gonna give me another article?
I didn't dismiss the Medium article. I just said that I don't know how reliable this person is because I have to look into who they are. But they also mentioned Top Drop. This other article, as I'm
Okay.
skimming through, makes a really good example. You could feel like you have a hangover or party too hard the night before, which is like, yeah, sometimes we do things that like might make us feel a little bit shitty after, like getting shit-faced at a party. But does that mean that getting shit-faced at a party is something that like we should just never do ever because we might wake up with a hangover?
Yeah, I guess it could feel like a hangover, I guess, right?
Yeah, like, I mean, I've had soreness and pain from engaging in sexual activity, and that doesn't mean that I'm like, it might take me a few days to recover from that, and that's fine. That doesn't mean that the sexual activity was abusive. That's what people are kind of talking about when it comes to recovery and things like that.
Okay, hold on. Because now I'm like reading on stream looking for sources instead of like engaging with you.
I mean, I don't know why you
What
didn't
does
bring
subdrop?
them.
Do you know what Jennifer Bene is? Bene.
I do not.
Okay, they
But
look very
I
official,
see
but I
this-
guess we can go through.
I see the article.
Okay, honestly, the emotional side is the more dangerous half. Emotions can wreak havoc on our logic, and then suddenly, even though we're normally all okay with our play, partner, dom, daddy, etc., we can suddenly feel abandoned, depressed, or unloved. It can hit you like a surprise too. I don't often get subdrop, but the times I have, it can show up while I'm in the middle of something innocuous like my day job or ordering coffee. In the next moment, you can feel like you might cry, or you're upset at the dom for reason that can feel totally logical at the moment.
I'm trying to find specifically where you're reading from.
It is it's
You're
about
not
20% down the page, or 10% down the page. And I'll drop this in chat too.
So this is specifically talking about usually pain play. The intense experiences of both pain and pleasure trigger a sympathetic nervous system response, which causes a release of epinephrine from this, oh god, I can't even pronounce that, from your brain, as well as a dump of endorphins, and can't pronounce that either. These natural chemicals, part of the fight or flight response, produce the same effect as a morphine-like drug, increasing pain tolerance as the scene becomes more intense. So basically it's your body's natural response to if you're experiencing pain, it's going to want to stop you experiencing pain. That's part of the just how it goes with pain play.
You're reading from the Jennifer Bene article or Bene?
Yes.
Okay. Did you get to the
It's
emotional
like
part?
an AMA.
Which is what I've been talking about.
I am scrolling through and trying to skim through the whole thing.
You can do a control F on depressed.
See?
And you'll find it.
And it says, all of these happy chemicals are why submissives, masochists, and pain sluts do all the fun BDSM things that we do. We get a high from the interaction, the intense intimacy, and the flood of fun, all natural drugs. So just like any other kind of, high, chemical high, sometimes there can be a low.
Yeah. That's exactly how I described it, right? Especially when she goes into the emotional side.
Okay. Drop can be associated with feelings of loneliness, mental and physical exhaustion, confusion, insecurity, tremors, and many other physical symptoms. If you've had pain in a session, then there's going to be bruises, soreness, general pain from post-session fun. Pain can make you tired. Pain disorders are a nightmare because existing is exhausting when you're in pain. Despite what many books will tell you, you're not going to feel a normal spanking the next day. Yes, true.
True.
Yeah, you're probably gonna have like literal physical, like from pain play, you will have physical marks that will have to heal after time. That doesn't mean that it's
Wait, I'm not talking about
inherently
the
a bad
physical
thing.
part. Come on. We're
That's
talking about the
also part
emotional
of this.
part. I'm talking about that feeling of depression and mental abuse afterwards.
Okay, so, and then literally right after that, whatever happens, stop, evaluate, and communicate. Text or call your Dom as soon as possible. A good Dom will know what a sub drop is, and they'll be there to talk to you about what you're feeling and why you're feeling it. But if you can't get a hold of them, you need to stop and evaluate. Remind yourself that it's normal. Remind yourself of what happened during and after the session, that there should have been aftercare, and sometimes that is helpful to hold on to. If it
Right.
happened quickly on site or at the club, or if it was a whole night of cuddling in bed together.
Right. So,
So
like I
basically, they're
said,
literally
it's normal.
saying
It's
they're saying it can be
normalizing people
normal.
expecting. Yeah, exactly. They're normalizing.
They're saying it can be normal to have an emotional low, and you know what they say immediately after that? Communication is key. Talk to the other person about what you're feeling and why.
Exactly. This is exactly the source of my problem, right?
So what is wrong with saying, hey, you might have a little bit of like, you know, not only physical healing to go through, but you have to like, you might have a little bit of a dip in your like chemical and like balance because of the scene. Talk to your partner and communicate with them and have an honest and open conversation. How is that bad?
Right. So now we have this terminology introduced, told to the person that this is what they should expect, that they should expect to feel, to possibly encounter this, that they, in feelings of being depressed, feeling she used some pretty good language here, feeling abandoned, feeling unloved, that it can hit you at any time, like that people should be expecting this, which I would argue that these I wouldn't argue, like we know that these are the exact kind of feelings that you would have when you're being abused, but instead of recognizing it as actually abuse, we're telling the person that this is normal, right? And to communicate with your partner about things like this, try not to have it happen in the future, instead of telling the person that, hey, you should absolutely feel really good after this, and if you don't, that means you've done something wrong, and you should make sure it doesn't happen again.
That's not what that said at all. That said that okay, first of all, she mentions at the beginning that you will be experiencing an emotional high, like where you are actually, like you walk away from the session feeling good because you just had basically the equivalent of like doing drugs, right? It's like it's tricking your brain into doing natural forms of drugs. It's like going out and drinking. And it's telling someone, after you do something that intense with adrenaline and all of these chemicals, that yes, you might feel a little low in comparison after. That is a natural response that our bodies have, just like having a hangover.
Like, these are some serious things that you're telling a person that they should be expecting to feel. All the same things that you should be expecting to feel if you're actually abused or traumatized, right? And that instead of telling them that indeed these are not normal, we actually, in the article, it says these are normal. That this is my problem.
It depends on the intensity of the play. That if you are really pushing yourself to like feel a huge endorphin rush and like chemically altering your brain that much, yeah, there's gonna be the same amount of blowback as there is when you're doing drugs. But does that mean that doing the drugs is bad? Would you tell someone to not drink or do any sort of drug if they have some sort of negative body response afterwards?
I would tell somebody, if they're experiencing something that is indistinguishable from the same sort of feelings that you should expect to have if you're being abused or traumatized, that you're actually being abused or traumatized, and you should never listen to a person who says that this is a normal and expected feeling to have.
She's not saying it's like normal or expected. She's saying that sometimes it can happen with pain play and intense scenes, depending on how much you push it.
Okay, I think she says it's normal like right after, right?
She's like very specific, and that's why at the beginning you don't want to talk about the pain part, like the physical part, but that's part of this. When people go into extreme physical play,
okay,
that leaves not just physical stuff to recover from, but it is a chemical response.
Okay.
This is not normal in your average BDSM play. I would say. I've never
So you
experienced a
disagree with
sub drop
this
that's
article?
intense. No, I don't necessarily disagree with her. I understand what she's trying to say. She's saying that in an intense scene where you're using like canes and whips and like in very intense pushing to the point of an emotional high, that once you come out of that, and normally she said it can happen after a session, but it's usually the next couple of days or so it could happen because
Yeah,
it's your
there's a very
body
wide
building your
window.
chemicals back up.
Yeah, or it's just you actually feeling the reaction somebody who got traumatized would feel. If you're
No, because if you're traumatized, normally you don't have the emotional high.
this
You
is, we're
do
talking about
realize that,
depression here.
right?
This isn't an
No,
emotional
no,
high.
no, no. You
Depression is
don't.
an emotional low.
Yes, that's the point, dude. If you're fucking being abused, you don't get emotional pleasure from the abuse.
Right. This
You're
entire
not
thing is
experiencing a high. The whole she's
that's not
talking
the
about
part of that's not the
no,
part.
that's the part. It's very, very fucking important. Okay, if you're being abused and the first thing you feel is depressed, feeling lonely, all of that other shit, then like the point of that is like if right off the bat you're feeling shitty, that is abuse. If you're experiencing high and you're like enjoying yourself and having a great fucking time and you feel like you're over the moon, and then the next day you feel a little shitty because your body's chemical response, that is a totally different fucking experience. That is two separate things.
Okay, so we're gonna move the goalpost again. So this feeling of depression and this feeling of feeling used and unwanted is not necessarily something that Aftercare would take care of, which is the action that happens after the scene is over.
Aftercare can happen literally immediately after the scene, or it can happen just in general. Like I have aftercare sessions with my dom when we're not even doing scenes.
Okay,
We just it's bonding.
So you're in the BDSM community. When we hear the term sub drop, what's the timeline that they're talking about? Not in this article, but how do people explain that in general? Because I'll just find another article explaining that you should feel the sub drop happening immediately or days later.
I mean, I've never specifically had anyone tell me that I should feel anything after a session.
So, okay, so you think that? Do you think that's the way to go?
I think that you are fundamentally misunderstanding the point of what they're talking about here. So
it sounds like you didn't need to know anything about Aftercare to enjoy BDSM.
No, I was like involved in communications about like consent, and whenever I talk to somebody before I engage and play with them, I tell them, here's what lines I don't want you to cross, please respect that. Here's our safe words, I'll tell you if I feel uncomfortable, and I give them what they're allowed to do. Like I'm like, you are specifically allowed to do this. If I say no, it's okay for you to push past that, I will give you a specific safe word if I don't want that.
So you went into BDSM without any expectations on how you should feel afterwards. But you would say that if you felt really bad, if you felt extremely terrible, that you felt used, unwanted, all of these
I mean,
describers
if I came
here,
out of it
that you would think that something
okay,
happened, right?
If I went into a session and I had no fun whatsoever, and I didn't experience this huge emotional high where I was like really enjoying myself, and the only thing I felt was depression or being used, then obviously I'm not into that, or someone abused me.
Okay, what if you did feel all the good things, and then afterwards, a couple days later, you're thinking about it, and then all of a sudden you feel really depressed, and you're like, wow, that was really fucking crazy. Or I feel extremely used when I think about it. That guy just did whatever he wanted to, and I know I agreed to it, but I kind of feel disgusted right now. Like I kind of feel unloved and treated like a piece of meat, right? And you have that.
That's why she talks about how it's a body's chemical response, because emotions are not rational. Like if you're coming down from a high, you can feel really shitty after any kind of high. That doesn't mean what you are feeling is not valid. It just means that what you were feeling, like when you have depression, sometimes you can feel paranoid about people not liking you. That doesn't mean that they don't like you.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know how more to
But that's why
that we
she
can go down
says,
this line.
when she says, if you feel that way, immediately talk to the other person about it, and communication is important.
Sure. So my issue isn't with that part. Obviously, you should be doing that. My issue is the fact that we're normalizing these feelings, right?
It's not that it's normal. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Okay, is it normalized to have a hangover?
No, it's normalized here that people should expect to feel depressed, used,
Is it
and
normalized to have a hangover? Do you think in our culture, it's pretty normalized that people experience like a hangover after a night out of drinking?
Yes.
That people talk about it like it's a normal thing.
Is it normalized to feel trauma? That people should feel normal, experience trauma, and that
She doesn't
this
even
is something
say
they should expect?
specifically trauma. She just says that like feelings of loneliness and depression.
Yeah. Is it normalized to feel lonely and depressed after a sexual activity? Do you think this is things that we normalize?
I mean, it's normal. You can feel lonely and depressed from anything that makes you feel emotionally high. You can feel lonely and depressed after you do fucking cocaine, like a few days later.
Okay, so BDSM activity, obviously very good, very rewarding for a lot of people. If you enjoy it, you should do it. It's absolutely valid. My issue here is with the term aftercare, and that the problem I have with aftercare is that we normalize people who might be experiencing trauma, that they actually might be, that they're given an excuse as to why it might be. They have terminology like
It's not an excuse.
they have, okay, sure, it's not an excuse, that they're, if they experience these things, they're told beforehand that this is the sub drop. They go into these situations, checking all the boxes for consent. They agree the entire way. Afterwards, when they might have the feeling, I should say, they might have the feeling of being depressed, being unwanted, unloved, instead of engaging with that as it should be, we're then being told that actually I agreed to this.
Person. No,
actually, I agreed to this,
what they're being
and I was told beforehand that I should expect this, instead of actually recognizing possible trauma when it actually happens, recognizing actual abuse.
Told in the article you cited is to have a conversation about their dom about those things together. But okay.
Yeah, I'm not saying that that's what it says. I'm saying that these are mechanisms in place to prevent somebody from actually recognizing abuse and trauma.
It's not
right. Isn't that my point?
Anyone.
We literally have a substitute for it right here.
There's no substitute. Coming down off of an emotional high isn't the same thing as like a trauma response.
Okay, just one last time. How would you differentiate somebody who's actually feeling trauma and abuse and experiencing these feelings of being unwanted, used, unloved from somebody who's experiencing a sub drop?
Did they experience an emotional peak that would chemically, like neurochemically fuck with their brain?
When you say peak, you mean like a feeling of elation? Or
yes.
Okay. So
did you feel high?
So if the person felt like high during the session, but afterwards felt really bad, that there's no way that they could have actually been abused during that session, that actually it was just the sub drop?
No, I'm not saying there's absolutely zero way that they could feel abused during the situation. It depends. It's so fucking complicated, dude. It depends on
it
what
sounds really complicated now, but on Twitter, your entire like army of corn or whatever the fuck that was, like really went in on me over the past 3 days.
My name is Sarah.
Anyway.
Okay, it was you who was Jake's girlfriend and a bunch of people with corns in their avatar.
Fucking property, dude. I hate when people do that shit. Just because I'm dating him does not mean I am his community or his community is mine. I hate that. That shit's so condescending. Please stop that shit. Every fucking time.
Wait, are you not a part of this community?
Like, barely. I'm not his fucking property or his community manager. I literally just date a guy and we talk on, we interact with people on Twitter. A lot of the people responding to you weren't even following me or him.
Okay. Well, I think the people I had the most issues with had the corn in their name. It was a little cringe. Honestly,
Oh
I'm
my
trying
God.
not to be toxic on Twitter, and they really push me to my limit. But do you remember the point I was trying to make with that before you like accused me of conflating things right there? I know I was coming to a point. Oh, yeah. Okay, I got it. So when we're talking about this actually being really complicated, it seems like all the people who were brigading me didn't seem, including yourself and what you said, seemed like it was pretty straightforward, right? That I was just fundamentally wrong about something,
You
about what I
are
was talking about.
fundamentally wrong, but we're also
We
talking
have
about
just had this
sexual
conversation.
relationships and
Sure,
relationships
and we have
between
just had
people
this conversation, and you're
emotions.
now telling me that my idea is extremely complicated.
Yes, human relationships and emotions and sexuality are actually very complicated. Fun fact.
Okay, so this isn't something that should be treated as being fundamentally straightforward, right?
No one said it was straightforward. They were saying that your usage of terminology was incorrect.
Okay, and when we just went through this discussion right now, we actually see my usage of the term aftercare and how it relates to subdrop actually was correct, especially when when I specified it, right?
Specifically about subdrop,
Sure.
and you still
And every
don't
time somebody
understand the point of subdrop.
we have already had this conversation over again. I don't know why you're saying I don't have the idea of subdrop when we're reading the same thing right now. We both agreed that subdrop could be being feeling.
You were saying
I don't know what to tell you, but you're not real. You're just saying this is my personal experience, and that's fine. Actually, no, it's fine. It's fine. I don't want to get.
You're engaging in a behavior that could be risky or could make you feel bad sometimes, maybe. If you like push your neurochemical boundaries a certain way, so you should stop doing that thing. Is like the in conclusion of
this
your
is
argument.
Exactly what you're doing on Twitter. But I'm gonna calm it down real quick. This is the last time I'm gonna say this. We can talk about something else afterwards. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that a tool like Aftercare and its use when dealing with subdrop can give subs the feeling that they should be expecting to feel depression and different feelings like being used, being degraded, like outside of the scene, and that's normal. I think we both came to the conclusion that that is true. It's just that you think that that should also be expected or should be okay when you have an emotional high during the session itself.
It's literally a chemical response that you're talking about. Yes,
every emotion that we have
yes,
that's all chemical responses. So when you actually experience trauma and you actually experience feelings of depression, these are chemical responses. And my problem is it's indistinguishable for somebody between having a subdrop or being actually having feelings of being abused and experiencing trauma.
It's not indistinguishable.
It's pretty close at the very least. I would say it's indistinguishable because I don't know what the difference would be, because it's extremely emotional, right? You think I've never experienced a feeling of trauma?
You've never experienced subdrop. You've never experienced being a submissive.
Oh, what does that have to do with anything?
How can you tell if something is indistinguishable if you don't have any experience?
Okay, so I do have the experience of feeling extremely depressed, unloved, unwanted, discarded. And when I see somebody who has the same experiences that I do go into a situation like this, and they experience those feelings of being abused and having trauma inflicted upon them, are then told that they should be expecting things like depression. No, I'm not. That they're going into this session like with the knowledge that they could be experiencing something like depression, feeling unused, unloved, discarded, things like that, right? And that they're actually being told that this is normal.
You know what? They're not actually. They're even being said. If you look at the bottom of this too, it's not saying that this is normal. Did you read the end of this? So it says stop, evaluate, and communicate. And it's, what else can I do? Put together an aftercare kit. Like, have caffeine, like something like that. Something sweet to help bring up.
I've already agreed with everything sugars. Like this. My problem is the fact that...
most of all, don't blame yourself.
Okay, this is not what I'm talking about, though. You don't
What
have to
can I
blame
do
yourself.
and then it says, what can I do to avoid subdrop? Drink water before, during, and after play. A glass of something high in simple sugars like orange juice right after
We've
can help as
already
well
talked
because it
about
can give
this.
your body a boost as it's adjusting to the loss of happy chemicals. Aftercare. Get wrapped up in a
The
blanket, stay
hydration
warm,
argument
get
again.
cuddled. That's literally the art. This is the article you're using, says this.
Yeah, I went out of my way to be very specific when I'm talking about aftercare as it relates to emotions and mental states, right? So what I'm saying, BDSM, cool, awesome. My issue is with aftercare and that it can act as a substitute for people to be, it normalizes the feelings that somebody might have if they were actually traumatized and abused and not be able to address them properly.
If
those feelings might be feelings like depression.
They don't say
it might be feelings
about
of being
trauma
unloved
or abuse. They don't say it's normal to feel traumatized. Finish? You're fucking
no.
wrong.
I didn't say.
I
didn't say it's normal to feel like you were traumatized. I'm saying it's the feelings of being traumatized are normalized as what you should experience.
No, it's not. She doesn't say traumatized. She says
I specifically said no, she doesn't say traumatized. I'm saying the feelings of somebody who has experienced trauma or abuse are having feelings like depression, feeling unloved, things of that nature that you should expect to feel shitty in one way or another after the session.
She's saying that you shouldn't expect it. She's saying it can possibly happen. Here are ways that you can avoid it.
Exactly. So when you do experience these things, instead of saying that, oh, actually something really bad happened there, you're saying, actually, this is just something that happens from time to time. This is the subdrop.
She's saying that it's bad and it's a thing that you should address, and that's why you need to communicate with your partner.
I understand she said that. That has nothing to do with the point that we've introduced a term that can take the place.
She's saying that you will feel bad. That's not good. Take care of yourself. Here are ways to prevent yourself from feeling bad. Here are ways to take care of your body so you don't feel crappy after pushing your body to its limits.
These are all great things, but are not what I'm talking about.
That is literally the counter argument to your issue with the idea that it could be used to disguise abuse.
How is that the counter argument?
Because your literal source that says we're normalizing feeling shitty after doing an intense activity. It's like, yeah, it's just like saying you're gonna feel like shit after you go rock climbing. That doesn't mean rock climbing is primed for abuse.
Okay, the activity I'm talking about is between two people over a sexual activity, where things like abuse and trauma can happen, especially in a sexual activity like BDSM, right? And when I say that when aftercare has to be administered to make sure that you're taking care of people's emotion, that when we say that this aftercare can tend to somebody's subdrop, that feeling of being extremely shitty, that depressed mental state, is a substitute for somebody who might have actually be experiencing trauma or being actually abused, and say, actually, I knew beforehand that this could happen, and that
it's not.
I'm not saying this happens every time or that this is what subdrop says. I'm saying that when we have subdrop there as a way to think about.
Wait. So do you want people to not talk about the fact that your brain can have a neurochemical response to like pain? Should we just not talk about the fact that that's a thing at all? Should we not tell people to take care of their bodies so that happens less often for them?
We should, and we should make sure that these activities aren't something that people should need aftercare for their mental.
But you will need aftercare for any of those things. If you do any intense physical activity or emotional activity, it will require aftercare.
Yes. When you're saying aftercare now, you're talking about just taking care of your physical state or even your mental state.
It says aftercare.
I'm talking about somebody's emotional state of having a feeling of depression. I don't understand why you have to keep going back to this. I don't understand why we're talking about rock climbing and getting your partner something to drink. So it's fine. I think we've run through the argument. At this point, we're just sort of
You are so
smashing.
fucking stupid. Oh my god. You don't understand what aftercare is at all. Yes, there will be an emotional high. It's important to take care of somebody emotionally. Wrapping them in a blanket, giving them cuddles. Those things are emotional, dude. They're not just physical.
I'm literally not talking about any of this.
That's what they say in the article. That you use as a source.
I'm saying what you're saying right now has nothing to do with the point that I'm making.
Then why did you use this as your source?
Wait, just because I used it as a source, an opinion article, I'm literally getting the definition. Wait, not even that. I agree with everything in the article for the most part, right?
So if you agree with everything in the article, then what's wrong with the article or the terminology?
From a structural standpoint, from engaging in BDSM activities, I think the term aftercare, this is my whole hypothesis, the term aftercare for people we're looping again. When we say aftercare, we're talking about we're talking about the need to check on the mental and emotional state of your partner afterwards, because they could be experiencing a sub drop, right? And the sub then has this knowledge beforehand, when they've consented to everything, that there's a chance that they're going to feel a sub drop. And what I'm saying is that when somebody is actually traumatized or abused, instead of coming away with that conclusion, they're going to come away with the conclusion that actually that's just a sub drop. That's something I signed up for, and that's something I agreed for. That's my problem with the structure here.
The structure.
I'm not saying that they shouldn't feel that way. I'm not saying they shouldn't feel that way.
No, the whole
I know what
point of
aftercare
is to weed that out, to tell, is this a sub drop, or did you have a trauma response? We should talk about that. That's why aftercare exists.
Sure. Did you have a sub drop, or did trauma actually happen? Can you tell me how you distinguish? Well, fuck, we already talked about this. You said that to distinguish between trauma and a sub drop is that as long as they felt good during the session, then if they have something that is akin to trauma, is actually just the sub drop. Is that correct?
That could be a determining factor. Yes.
I just don't agree with that. I feel like somebody, whether they were feeling good during the scene or not, has nothing to do with the feelings of trauma and abuse afterwards.
Okay, if you feel literally high because of the sex that you're having and the intense emotional experience that you're having, it could absolutely be a factor that you should be considering whenever you think about how you feel after the session. And that's only one of the factors. You should also consider your history. Do you have previous traumas or things that could trigger you? All of those things need to be taken into account. Do you have other mental disorders that could be affecting you in some way that could be like, oh, this is more than just sub drop? Consider your own mental health.
Yeah.
There are ways to determine.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, because it feels like we're just going to keep going in circles. So.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. Not like I think it's like I know we had that miscommunication yesterday. I appreciate you coming on. Nonetheless, you didn't have to. You didn't have to make that adjustment. And I actually really enjoyed the conversation because it educated me more on the perspective of somebody who has a healthy relationship with the BDSM community. And
all right, well, if you actually want to learn anything about, if all you hear is responses or stories of people who experienced abuse while participating in BDSM, it's going to color your experience and assume that the community is rife with abuse and that, the majority of people participating are experiencing that. So I would say talk to people who are actually engaging in it healthily.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, just because I know you're closing on here, but I agree with you. When I'm critiquing or having criticisms towards the BDSM community, I'm not sure if I do it enough, but I know this is something that I'm trying to do, is to make sure that everybody knows that I don't think the BDSM community is bad, because that's not the case. I think the entire community is extremely cool, and the fact that there's so much communication and so many different organizations out there, people making sure that they're trying to keep as much people as safe as possible and giving them the resources is really, really awesome, and they should definitely be praised for it.
The logical conclusion that one the reason why so many people are angry with you is it feels like you're pulling a Jordan Peterson, where you're burying the lead a little bit. You're sort of implying where you only spread these specific things and kind of poison the well, but you don't talk about the other side of a community that you're technically not even a part of. So that's why people are getting angry with you.
So
It
are you
feels like
are you
you
saying
are-
I should have been more upfront about me being okay with the BDSM community?
I would say it would help, but it definitely feels more like you are trying to come at this from like a Puritan angle. And it does feel like you are making implications.
Okay. I will definitely work on that. That's legit criticism that I'm taking to heart.
And I would say that when you talk to other people who are submissives, it does help to not talk down as if you think you know what's better for us than we do.
Okay.
All right, well, I'm going to go do some aftercare with my stream
Okay.
after this conversation.
That's good. You guys have fun. Again, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it.
Thanks.